Hello, Smart Money Tree podcast listeners. Welcome to this week's show. My name is Kirk Chisholm, and I'll be your host. And today I'm joined once again with my good friend Doug Hagerin. Hey, Doug.
Hey, Kirk. How you doing? Hey, I just want to let you know I'm exceptionally excited about the results from last Tuesday. Now ask me what results I'm excited about.
What results, Doug?
I hopefully will get no more texts and no more emails and no more door knocks. Can we all agree in this country that at least that part is a good thing that it's stopping?
I think we can all agree that getting rid of all the advertisements is a good thing. I have a few people I know in Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, another one in Philly, and they were like, it is abysmal the amount of advertising. They're like, it's 99.9% political. Maybe you see like a Coca-Cola commercial, but like it's all political, and they're like, we are done with it. Like, we're so sick of it. It's nasty. It's just ridiculous. And I feel bad for people in swing states. I don't know if you know this, Doug. I live in a very special state, Massachusetts. We are one of two states in the whole country that every county was blue. Out of 50 states, Massachusetts, the other one is Rhode Island. And Rhode Island, I think, only has one county. But maybe they've got two or three. But Massachusetts, the whole thing was blue. No other state, not even Vermont, not even Connecticut. None of the states were all blue except for Massachusetts.
And on the other side, Kirk, there's only one state in the entire country that it can stand out and say they are the most Republican state in the country. Do you know which one that is?
I do, but I think there's actually two.
I believe there's only one, but if I'm missing one, you bring it to my attention.
You're missing one, but go ahead. Tell me the one you think. I know the one you think.
Oh, you're thinking, oh, that's right. There is another one on the East Coast, isn't there?
That's right.
Yes.
There is.
Oklahoma and Appalachia, and you go ahead and name it.
West Virginia.
West by God, Virginia.
Yep.
Yes. Neither one of those states had a single county vote blue. So 2 states in the country on either side that are holding the line together for their corresponding constituents.
We're sharing the map. We're sharing the electoral map here for the ones we saw. Now, I don't know if this is finalized. It looks like certain states down there, and I always get them confused. I think it's Mississippi.
That's Mississippi right there.
Mississippi, where looks like there's about 10 counties that are still gray.
Yeah.
But assuming all this is up to date and accurate, because this is the one everyone's pushing. Of course, you never believe what you see on the internet, but this seems to be relatively accurate. So it's just interesting as we look at this. I mean, there's a ton of red, obviously, but
less population in those areas. It's spread out more.
Exactly. Like, look at Maine. Maine is a historically Democratic state, and the whole upper part of Maine is red, but you've got the coast, which is blue. Well, the coast is where everybody lives. People don't live in the other parts. You know, you got like 100 acres per person up there in upper Maine, but it's just interesting to see.
Minnesota is a perfect example too. If you look at it, totally red, except for right there next to Fargo, and then you've got the cities on the southeast side, of course, that dominate. You know, that are very blue, and then the North Shore, that northeast quadrant.
What is that?
Has a lot of people there that are exceptionally creative and exceptionally left leaning, and it just dominates the voting for the entire state.
Really? There's that many people in the upper right?
Yeah, it's
really?
considered the north. It's the North Shore of Minnesota. It's considered the place that most people like to vacation to. Most people like to have a second cabin up there, or they like to. A lot of retirees are moving up there. It's the Iron Range, so there's a huge population from Duluth up north along the North Shore.
Are there big cities up there? Because I don't know the demographic. I don't know
not big cities. The only big cities are down there on the left. You can see kind of the counties are bigger there. It tends to be more rural, but it's a lot of very touristy, cabiny, summery kind of places along the Lake Superior. So you've got places like Duluth, which is it's a city. It's and then you've got 2 harbors, and you've got Grand Marais, which is one of the places a lot of people end up going up to. So it's just extreme, and then you've also got the Boundary Waters Canoe Wilderness area dominates that area. So it's a lot where they've tried very hard to keep industry from going in and mining it. You can't take motorized vehicles into into it. There's like thousands of lakes up there that you can canoe and non-motorized. People go up there and camp. And so, of course, you have a lot of the outfitters, very outdoorsy, just very, very outdoor focused area, environmental life. And it has obviously stayed very blue in that section. But when you look at population concentration in the entire state, if you take the cities and add that in, it dominates the electorate. So,
yeah, it's interesting in looking at these different states. I mean, even like Vermont, which is, I was actually surprised to see there was a part of that which was extremely. See if I can pull it up here. There's 2 counties in the upper right part of Vermont which are red. I was actually surprised at that. I thought Vermont was a fully blue state.
Yeah. You get northern Vermont. I mean, you got Burlington and places like that. College towns, very Ben and Jerry's there. But you get up to that northern part, you start getting near Plattsburgh, New York, which is an old Air Force base, and I think a lot of military, focus left over from it. Even though Plattsburgh has been shut down for years, I think it doesn't surprise me that part of the state has probably leaned a little more right.
Yeah, it's just I always find it interesting to see the aftermath. Like, I'm going to see if I can pull up a. I'm going to see if I can
actually the northern part there I was looking at was New Hampshire. I apologize. It's actually the northeast of Vermont that's red. The left, right. New Hampshire is actually the northern part's red, going into Maine.
Right, and I was actually curious to see New Hampshire. I thought New Hampshire would be more split, because as far as I don't know New Hampshire's geography that well either, but I would imagine that most of the population is down in the southern part of the state. Yeah. So
it is. It's very rural up there. I mean, again, you get outside of some of the main cities of Maine, and you're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Hampshire.
Yeah, let's see if I can pull up the. Well, we'll come back to that. I'm going to pull up the picture of the electoral from 2020. It's actually very similar. California is a little more blue. The Northeast was. No, actually, it's pretty similar. Not much has changed. It's oddly enough. We'll pull it up. But anyway, moving on. I don't want to spend too much time talking about that. Well,
I do want to segue back because I think you have another chart, at least another focus, talking about how much was spent. Since I came into this talking about the campaign ads, there's actually
oh god,
posted some data and information. It's near the end. It's one of the last things that's posted on the list there, if you can find it, but. Actually right above the map, where they talked about the amount of money that was actually spent on it. $15.9 billion spent on the campaign across this country's election cycle, which, to translate that down, that's $50 per capita being spent just to get you to side one way or the other.
I think there's a lot of interesting things we can pull from the election, and I'm going to stay away from the politics somewhat, but I do want to actually make some comments because I was called out for the last episode of being a little bit political, and we try not to be, but frankly, it was the day before the election. It's kind of hard not to be, and so we talked about it a little bit, and I'll share some other thoughts because I've had a lot of thoughts with Republicans and Democrats since. And so I actually came to some interesting ahas myself through it. But, what's interesting is, we spend think of it, almost $16 billion on political ads. How ridiculous is that? You could feed the entire homeless population in the United States for probably a year with that money. Like, that is a ridiculous amount of money. Now, I could be off. I don't know how many homeless there are, but that's a huge amount of money that could be spent. It reminds me of when I was growing up. I grew up in a town where they had to basically vote. I think it was like 75-80% of the town's budget went towards the school and the teachers and all that. And so growing up, it was like every 2 years, what would happen was, the schools would say, "Oh my God, we're going to shut down one of the schools. It's going to be terrible. It's falling apart. There's lead in the water." Like, they'd come up and they'd scare the pants out of everybody. "Oh my God, we don't have enough money. The teachers are all going to quit. They're going to close the school." And one year, I think it was probably when I was in college, probably like late 90s, and they came out, and what ended up happening is they bamboozled somebody who was somewhat successful, but obviously stupid. And they bamboozled somebody to say, "Oh, here's what we should do. We should spend we should raise some money and do an advertising campaign to let everybody know that we need to spend more money on our kids. Now, granted, this is from a wealthy town which has one of the best school systems in the country, and they're complaining about the education quality in their kids. So keep that in mind. This is where these cuckoos live. And so what they said was they spent $150,000 on this advertising campaign. You know how much the schools said they needed to keep the schools open? They needed 100,000. So they spent 150,000 on a campaign to raise 100,000. And after they didn't win, because people have been around long enough know that it's just bullshit. What happened was after they came out, they said, actually, we only need 20,000. Like that was the result. Like, you fools, why not raise 150,000, give it to the town because you're so interested in your kids' education, give it to the town. But no, they're like, well, we want to tell everybody else what to do because you're all idiots and we're smarter than you. So why don't you just do that? Now, here's the funny thing. Like, we have friends that lived in Beacon Hill with us when our kids were younger, and they moved down to Miami. And Miami is an interesting place that apparently there's a school district, which if you live there, good on you. It's like one of the best in the country. And the reason it's one of the best in the country, despite the fact that the school district is not all that wealthy, is what they do is they have the school district with all the kids that live there. And what happens is the wealthy, because there's a wealthy section of Miami that lives there, they actually donate to the school. So the wealthy people with money send their kids to public school, will give money to the school to make the school better. So it's a quasi public private kind of place, and everyone wants to get in that school because the wealthy area contributes. But I think it's a brilliant way for people to just say, like, I'm giving back to the community, as opposed to the community I grew up in, which is we're selfish and we're stupid. We're just going to tell everybody what to do instead of logically saying, why don't we just raise the money for the town ourselves? And so I found the insanity of government, seeing that almost $16 billion going to ads to win when you could just, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Doug, but I believe most other countries have a public spending and a cap. It's like $200 million or whatever it is, and each candidate gets $200 million. I'm just making that number up, but $200 million they can spend, and it's equal, right? Everyone gets the same. It's public funding. It's not from private sources. You get all of the private interests out of this, and you're not spending a ridiculous amount of money to basically, to bait American politics for the next 4 years. Oh, I contributed to your campaign. Now you owe me. That's not good. I don't care who you vote for. That's a bad idea. So
I actually got something on that. So I just pulled up here from American prospect.org. So no limit nations that will allow no limits on contributions or what candidates can spend: Australia, Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, Germany, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Norway, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, and Turkey. The all limit nations, they actually have roughly, their current limit for federal campaigns is about $2,600 in the primary and $2,600 in general, maybe a little bit more. So we're talking I don't even know what that would buy you here. Belgium, Canada. Yeah, Belgium, Canada, Chile, France, Greece, Iceland, Ireland, Israel, Japan, South Korea, Poland, and Slovenia. And then countries with some limits, but not on donations: Australia, Hungary, Italy, New Zealand, Slovakia, and the United Kingdom. And of course, nations with contribution limits but no spending limits: Finland and the United States. So anyway.
Yeah, I think there's got to be some overhaul in the process. I mean, $16 billion into an election process, it's insane. And I know one party's like, well, this person gave a lot. Like, both parties had their billionaires contributing, so don't complain because Elon Musk contributed money. Whatever, you get your own billionaires. And there was a funny meme going around of I think it was a Jon Stewart. Actually, no, it was Jon Stewart. He's a Democrat, right? He had this skit about the convention, about the Democrats complaining about the Republican billionaires, and it's like followed up by Democratic billionaires. It was just like, it was a hilarious bit that he did on the Democratic convention, and it was just like, all right, like let's all be honest. Like, the hypocrisy is through the roof on both sides, and people just need to just grow up and move on.
That's the beauty of good comedy, though, is that they can
Yes.
literally, even if you lean on one side, you can poke fun at your own side. And and I think that was the one thing we've talked about on here is that the last thing to go in society is comedy. So I have a lot of respect for John. I mean, again, don't always agree with everything he says. I don't always agree with everything anybody says, but I think he does make some really, really good points, or at least comedic takes that he puts out there. Even people like Bill Maher, people like Dave Chappelle, again, they are willing to push the envelope and say the things that others are afraid to say. I did want to say one thing, Kirk, that was kind of reminded me of the spending 150 when it was only supposed to be 100. The thing you just said before reminded me of a school that I knew. And in case anybody's listening, I'll just kind of keep this, a little bit more generic. But this school was looking for an administrator, and they decided they were going to spend a tremendous amount of money, thousands and thousands of dollars, to hire consulting in order to help them find a new administrator for this school. At the end of the day, after spending all this, they ended up hiring one of the teachers within the school as the new administrator. It's like, you could have anybody from the outside that wasn't getting paid as a consultant could have looked and said that person was probably going to end up being the candidate anyway. But in order to get to that road, they fleeced thousands of dollars from the coffers.
CYA. Yep. That's all it is nowadays. CYA. No one wants to take liability, responsibility. That's unfortunate. But I do want to discuss a little wrap up from the week, because I think it's important. So here's some of my takeaways. So I was talking to, so we had one of our episodes we taped on Wednesday, and I had Phil and Barb on it. And Barb's from California; she's a Democrat, and Phil is a Democrat as well. I think he's from New Jersey. I'm probably butchering that, so apologies, Phil. But he might be from Virginia. I don't know. I'll have to look it up. I feel bad. I should know this, but we don't talk about it.
He's from a state in America.
Yes, he is from a state in America. That is true. I can.
He's not an immigrant.
He might be, but he's a citizen.
Sure, so, that's possible.
I think we're all immigrants, but anyway, so the point was I had a good talk with them, and we all kind of just talked about like what are our thoughts from the election. And after listening to them talk, I had some really interesting aha moments, and here are some of them. We had an election. One party won, one didn't. Some people are happy, some are sad, right? That is obvious, and I think people need to have their grief, right? The Dems who lost need to have their grieving period, and everyone else needs to give them their space to grieve. We all go through this every 4 years. I would say grieve quickly and grow up, because we're going to move on, and the country always does. Just like the right had to grow up and move on after Trump lost the last time. And so we all have to go through this. And I think as adults, you should be able to go through this. But here's my takeaways. In reflecting back on the election and leading up to the election, here's what I miss. I miss the old school Democratic Party. The old school Democratic Party, when I grew up, was the party of the First Amendment free speech. They were the party of social freedom, a social right to choose, not just abortion, to choose, who you want to be and just be your crazy and wild self. The party of anti-war. There were a lot of things I liked. I wouldn't consider myself a Democrat or a Republican. I am politically agnostic. Even though I have my leanings, I am politically agnostic. I do not identify with either party. But I appreciated the old school Democratic Party because there were some great things about them, which even if you don't agree with all of their issues, there are some things that I think were really good, right? And both parties have this, right? The Republicans, they also have their own stuff, right? They're pro-life, but they're also pro-death penalty. Like each party has their own hypocrisy to it. I never liked the pro-war position of the Republicans, which during Bush took on a whole new energy. And so, I think that while missing that part of them, they have completely gone off the rails in the last 4 years, and especially leading up to the election. I don't know when the Democrats stopped being anti-war, but I think it was probably when Obama won, because I think even during Clinton, it was still kind of anti-war. But I think when Obama was in, people were okay with wars and conflicts again, and certainly with Biden, we have 2 wars that have happened under his thing. So what I thought was interesting when John Stewart did another bit on Dick, like Dick Cheney, like you had Elon Musk and you had these other people, RFK and Tulsi, like going for Trump, and then he was like, and the Democrats, who do we get? We got Dick Cheney, and he's like, no, he's like, take him back, we don't want him. It was a great bit, but the point is, Dick Cheney was one of those people who actually bamboozled the country into going to war in Iraq, and now he's on the Democrat side. Well, really? Who would have guessed that? Like, his. Anyway, the point is I think we've gone through this. So what I realized, one of my ahas is we've gone through this in our country before, where, in the last 100 years, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have swapped sides. So there was a time where the Democrats were pro-slavery. And if you don't believe me, look it up. They were the pro-slavery party like many, many decades ago. And the Republicans were the anti-slavery party. Now, I wouldn't say the Republicans were pro-slavery at a certain point, but the Democrats got very, very, very protective about their image. And they're like, no, we're going the other side and we're going to be all for minorities and whatever. But the point is that flip-flopped, right? And right now we're seeing another flip-flop of the pro-anti-war and the First Amendment and all that. I'm not suggesting they're going to flip-flop entirely, but we're seeing issues flip-flop. And so I just point this out because it's like anything. If you pull your emotion out of it, you can start to see this stuff. And it wasn't until I reflected talking to like both sides that this became apparent that there have been some flip-flopping of issues. And I think a lot of people don't realize it because the Democrats used to be very, very heavily anti-war. And now it's just acceptable to many of them. Like I've asked them, I said, so what do you think of the fact that, we have this conflict with Israel? What do you think about the Ukraine? And they're like, oh, we need to defend these people. Like, that's what the Republicans said like 20 years ago. And you were against it then. And the Republicans are against the wars now. And it's not just because that you have the other side in power, which I know contributes to it, but there's a very heavy push in the Republican side of anti-war. And it has been for some time. Even when Trump was in, like there was no wars, but like people were very, against it. And I think as a country, we should be. That's a laudable goal. We should all be anti-war because I don't think we should be killing people anywhere or putting our own people in harm's way. I don't agree with that at all. And I do think we need the First Amendment. I think there are no other amendments if you don't have the first. Every amendment after the first is gone if you don't have the first one. So we do need that, and I think we need to get back to a place of normality where we can accept the fact that we have different opinions. Each party has their own opinions, and we don't have to agree with them, but I think we have to accept that the other person is a person, a citizen in our country with rights and with opinions, and they have rights to have those opinions, whether you agree with them or not. Your goal is to try to make the country better. And if we have rational discussions again, we can move more towards the middle instead of the extremes. I live in the great state of Massachusetts. I may be the only one who calls it that, but I digress. The great state of Massachusetts has a commercial funded by the state that says, you can't win the lottery if you don't play. For the moment, let's ignore the fact that there's a state-sponsored commercial suggesting that you go out and spend your hard-earned money gambling on lottery tickets with odds of over 100 million to 1 of winning. But it's true, you can't win if you don't play. I'm giving you the same opportunity here in the show. The only difference is I'm not asking you to buy a lottery ticket. I'm only asking 5 to 10 minutes of your time. But I will pay you at least 100 million Zim dollars for your time. We do have some foreign listeners, so if you don't like Zim dollars, we may have some other currencies as well. If you want to earn over 100 million Zim dollars, go to www.moneytreepodcast.com/free money to get your free money today.
I'd like to add on that really quickly because I think that's a great it's a great topic, and it's also good to understand what that means. There was a gentleman who was talking to someone who was hosting something and gave this person a microphone, and when the person started talking, there were a lot of boos in the background. And the person, that person said, hey, listen, they're booing me, my freedom of speech. And the person that was hosting it said, you have a right to say what you want. I'm giving you the mic for 15 minutes. It's an open mic. You have freedom of speech. They also have the right to boo you. Like, that's freedom of speech too. And I think we've lost, I think a lot of people have lost understanding what freedom of speech means. Freedom of speech means that you have the right to say what you want, but it also still means you may face some consequences for it. And you may not like the response that you get. And if you're unhappy about that, then that's your decision. But that doesn't mean if somebody tells you they don't like what you're saying, they're not suppressing your freedom of speech. Suppression of freedom of speech means that they've prevented you from getting out what you're trying to say, whether it's directly by cutting you off, whether it's through legal means to where you could be arrested or in prison, which is really what the First Amendment was all about, is preventing the government from stopping that, or whether or not you've got filters in between, such as through social media, where they've gotten, and this is not a private platform, because a private platform, they have the right to say, hey, look, this is what we want on here. But when certain platforms get so big that they now become an effective utility, which is where a lot of the arguments are on many of the social media, they've now become commonplace in our society for communication, almost at the level of the press, then it no longer becomes okay to suppress comments there too. But just because you don't like the response you're getting, or you don't like the response someone's heard, that does not mean that you are not being given the freedom of speech. And I think we've lost that. A lot of people have lost that. It's like, they want to force down what they don't want to hear. And I'm not saying everything that's being said is things that we should hear, but and that's obviously with limits. We've said for years that people over the age of 18 can't walk into, or 17 can't go into rated R. Why? Because of language and things like that. There's age-related censorship, but that's a different situation. Once people are adults, then whole different story.
I think Elon Musk said it best. Is he was getting interviewed on a show with I forget who it was, Don Lemon or some cuckoo. I don't like any of the corporate media people, so if I'm making fun of one of them, just assume it means all of them. But I think it was him, and he was talking about it's like, well, Elon Musk says I believe in freedom of speech. He's like, well, what about hate speech? He's like, yeah, is it against the law? He's like, no. He's like, well, what about like child pornography? He's like, that's against the law. He's like, like as a country, we can make laws to prohibit certain activities, right? And we could say, like, I don't think anybody except for the real, mentally ill are for child pornography. Everybody's against that. So, yes, there should be a law against that. And we put a law against that. So you're breaking the law if you do that. But everything else, like, that's not, well, I guess you could argue that's freedom of speech technically, but we as a society all agree that that's a bad idea, and we've said no. There's one thing that happened in the debate that with the VP debate where Walz talked about saying fire in a movie theater or hate speech, and people correct him after. I actually thought that was not allowed, but apparently somebody went through it and they said what happened was one of the Supreme Court justices mentioned that in context of a First Amendment decision, and people took that to mean that you can't say fire in a crowded movie theater, when actuality it had something to do with a completely different topic. And so I think there's a general thought process that that's not okay. But I believe, from my understanding, it actually is something you can say. You shouldn't say it, but I believe you can say it. So there's all this different thing, and just like you said, Doug, there are elements of decorum, right? There's etiquette. Like, you probably shouldn't say fire in a crowded movie theater, right? Like, unless there is a fire, but you probably shouldn't say that, right? And there's amount of etiquette which we've lost in our society, which, just because you don't agree, it doesn't mean you get up there and you start yelling and screaming in their face because you don't agree. You can, but like, you think about it, like how many political parties we have in this country? We've got a ton, actually. They don't get any credit or knowledge because they're so small, but I believe there's a communist party in this country. There's a socialist party in this country. It's not very big, but there is a communist party, and I think we should have that. I don't agree with them. I'll never support them, but I think it should exist because people should have the right to say whatever crazy, batshit crazy thing that they believe, because that is what freedom of speech is about. And as long as you have the right to express yourself and to not have the government basically crack down on your speech, because I mean, think of it this way, right? We had there's certain segments of the society that feel like they can't say what they feel, and I can't possibly understand what they're going through, but from a high level, I get it, right? You feel like you can't express yourself, and I can say that for the last 8, 12 years, many people on the right have felt that. The whole reason Trump got in the first time is because we had a quiet populist uprising, just like Brexit. People were shocked at Brexit because no one was willing to say, I'm for Brexit, until they got into the voting booth and they're like, screw you guys, we're sick of this, we're voting for Brexit. That's how Trump got elected. People weren't saying anything because they were afraid that they would get chastised as being a Trump supporter, so they didn't say anything and they went and voted for him, and it surprised everybody. The reality is those people didn't feel like they could say in public that they supported their party and their president. And up until, I would say, when Biden won, a lot of Republicans felt hunted, and Democrats were like, "That's crazy." No, I talked to them. They felt hunted. They felt like they couldn't express themselves, and that is not healthy in a civil society. Neither party should feel that. And when one party feels that way, it means the other side's gone off the rails. And we need to get back to a more reasonable centrist view where if you have a point of view, it is discussed in a rational manner between two opposing sides, and then a rational outcome comes of it, right? We don't have these extremist views that we've been getting in the last, I don't know, 20 years. We've got some of these cuckoo policies on both sides that, I think we all would agree is probably a bad idea. But the one good thing I'll say out of this is that I know Democrats are still mourning, and, like I said, take your time to grieve. But there are some good things to come out of this that the Democrats can maybe keep in mind. Is that Trump's team, if you really consider it, Trump was originally a Democrat. He, in his first term, like whatever it was, 8 years ago, he basically gutted the Republican Party. He completely gutted. Everyone in his own party was against him. He turned that party around into what it is now. You might like it or hate it, and I'm not saying you have to agree. I'm just saying what he did factually was he gutted the Republican Party and changed the dynamics to something that's a little bit more modern. He updated their opinions for a more modern populace, so he appealed to more people that were aggrieved and weren't feeling heard, and that's one of the reasons he got elected, right? Biden, the same thing, right? Biden appealed to people who were pissed off about Trump and all the things that they weren't feeling heard, right? And Trump won again for similar reasons. Now, here's something to take away from this. One thing I found really interesting, right, is the Republicans historically have always taken their own people and be like, here's the best person in our party. Look at this. They're going to be a part of our team. And like, whoa, wow, you got this great person, right? And the Democrats have done the same. Like either party has done this historically. They try to find the best people, and they're like, oh, look at this awesome team. You know what I found fascinating is Trump's team was basically a bunch of Democrats. Think about this for a moment. You have Elon Musk, was a lifelong Democrat. You have Tulsi Gabbard, who was a Democrat. He was elected as a Democrat, right? Robert Kennedy. You got Joe Rogan. You got Bill Ackman. You've got a bunch of others. You have people that were historically always Democrats, and some very smart people like Eric Weinstein, who's brilliant, and him and his brother maybe they're both lifelong Democrats. But the point being is, like, when they come out against their own party, that should say something about the party, not the people in the party. I'm not saying the Democrats are bad people, but the party itself has lost its way. And I think that was apparent from the election, is that the party was not doing the will of their own people. In many ways, they were gaslighting and lying to them. And the people that are Democrats should be pissed off, right? And next time they should want a better representation of themselves. I think that is what they should take away from this. And they should say, you know what, we need to regroup. We need to find a better representation of our people and not let the crazy extremists run the party, but actually find people who are more reasonable. Maybe get rid of the boomers who were 80 years old and maybe find Gen Xers who, I don't know if you can find some, let me know, because none of them are in power. But find rational people to take up the mantle and say, all right, we need fresh blood. We need new people. The Democrats do have solid people they could have run and they didn't. So, I don't agree with all of them, but I think they're solid candidates that the party could get behind. And I think they need to really get back and change things. Now, I want to stop talking about politics and I want to talk about how this leads into the markets, because I know you've heard me say my thoughts and you guys have been listening to me long enough. So hopefully you're giving me my time to express myself after the election, because I don't think we can move on without talking about it, and I don't want to ignore it because it happened. But
well, there's a correlated, not causative, correlated effect on what happened. What's going to lead to a lot of discussions and what we're going to have about what's going on with markets and economy. So, it is important to understand those kind of, the swell of things at the bottom that actually will have effect on what could occur going forward. And some of that is the emotional sentiment of Americans.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the takeaway that I would leave everybody with this, and we'll talk about this, we're not wrapping it up yet. Here's the takeaway. The markets are a discounting mechanism of the future. So when something happens, it happens because of expectations in the future, typically about 6 months. But when you have an election, the discounting mechanism is basically up till the election and the day after, right? It's not 6 months after. It's because you don't know, right? If Harris won, you'd have one result. If Trump won, you'd have another result. But if those were opposing results, and I don't know what the Harris result would have been, because we'd have to go back and history and see what it would have been, and obviously we can't do that, so we won't know what that is. But we do know what a Trump victory means to the markets, because you can just look at it. And if you guys weren't watching the stock market on Wednesday, you really missed a show, because basically what happened is everything went through the roof. But that is not the takeaway. The takeaway is what areas did particularly well. That is what you should have watched for. And if you have software that allows you to go back and roll back for days and watch historical markets happen, I know Thinkorswim used to have this on the retail platform, and I forget what they call it, ThinkBack or something, where you could replay time. It was great. So you could watch stuff as if in reverse. So I used to go back and watch the flash crash just because I thought it was really cool historically to see. Not sure if they still have that when they got acquired by Schwab, but I will say this, that if you go back and watch what the stocks did, what you'll see was there are certain areas that outperformed. Coal outperformed. Banks outperformed. Crypto outperformed. Some tech outperformed. I mean, a lot of areas outperformed. Here's what didn't outperform: gold, silver, mining stocks, international stocks. I mean, there's a ton of stuff. I mean, most US. What else did well? Small cap. Small cap had its best performing day, the Russell 2000, best performing day in I don't know how long in history, or at least a long time. I saw a stat the other day and I was shocked. It was up like 8% or some crazy number. But the point is, go back and look what the performance was of that day. And if you want to know how the market thinks about this election, that is the best indicator. Because what effectively happens in an election is a lot of people, including myself, we took a lot of positions off the table because we didn't know where the election was running. And I didn't really care if Harris or Trump won from my opinions of the future, or at least the short-term future, because I don't think it would have changed. My concern was, what if we don't have an answer for like 2 months of who won? That to me would have been a really bad outcome, and I was trying to avoid that. But after we had what the outcome was, it was pretty clear we had a winner, and that's all I cared about, was there was a winner. And so the market dictated what they think. And a lot of other people did that. They had cash on the sidelines. So once you realize who won, now people start pouring cash into the areas that they think are going to be good areas for the next 6, 12 months. So coal stocks, obviously, the Republicans are traditionally pro coal. I'm not sure I buy into that. I think really both parties are pro nuclear now, which is where things are going. But we do need to fill the gap. Uh, we're not going to have nuclear capacity for the next 5, 10, 20 years. So we need to fill the gap with something. And it's not going to be solar panels. So it's probably going to end up being coal. So I don't know that was a judgment for Republicans, but they're not anti-coal, that's for sure. But I'm not sure it really would have mattered because you have to get energy and you have to find it somewhere. So people, if you need to find it, you figure it out. So I'm not sure it would have mattered partisan, but that's what the market said, that this is good for coal. The market said it's good for banks. The market said it's good for U.S. stocks. It's good for small stocks. That is what the Trump victory says for the market. I don't need to know anything about the market or macroeconomics or earnings or any of that. I don't need to know that. And the reason I'm saying is because you don't need to know that. All you need to know is, what did the market do in reaction to a Trump victory? This is a very good indicator of what the market's probably going to do in the next 6, 12, 24 months, because the market is smarter than all of us. It is a collective decision-making machine based on hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people. So the market spoke, and you should be listening. Whether you agree with it or not doesn't matter. What you need to know is, this is what the market said. I mean, crypto was up, a lot of things were up, but international was not good. This is Friday, and China does not look good at all. So just be aware of how markets are reacting to decisions. And we talk about this in the show a lot. It's not the decision that matters. It's how the market reacts to the decision that matters, because that is your tell. That's your tell. You could say, well, I think this company is a good company. Well, if the market doesn't think so, then you're wrong. And that's the reality. Like, if you're investing in micro cap stocks that nobody knows about, okay, well, maybe you're right because no one saw it. But if you're looking at, well, should I invest in Apple or Microsoft? All the information's already out there. There's no information. Just watch where the direction is. The market's going to tell you what it thinks of the future because of the discounting mechanism. So that should be your big takeaway today, is not who won or lost the election, but how the market reacted to it and how stocks are doing moving forward. Tesla's up a lot. I think it's probably because of Musk being a part of Trump's team. I think it's silly. I don't think it has anything to do with Tesla. I don't know why it's going up, but the market thinks it's a good thing. It's up like 9.5% today. Why? I don't know. There's no information out, and he's not going to get any government contracts. It's stupid. But the market is saying this is what we think is going to happen. So my point is you don't have to agree. You don't have to like it, but you should observe and you should decide. Maybe you don't want to invest in Tesla. I don't. It's not a stock I watch, and I'm not going to follow. I'm not going to start now. And I don't agree or disagree with Tesla stock. I just don't follow. It's not one on my list. So you don't have to invest in something. You just pick things that you know and decide, like, all right, this is good for banks or bad for banks. This is good for crypto or bad for crypto, gold stocks, all these things. You have to make that decision. But this is a good indicator of how you should be constructing your decisions based on this kind of information. So I know we're going to get close to wrap it up soon, but I did want to convey that because if you watch from a Wednesday for like the next until next Wednesday, I think will be a good indication of where the markets are going to go. I did want to raise one more point, and I'll give it to Doug because I know Doug probably wants to talk about a lot. Something to keep in mind. We've said this before in the show, and I'm going to repeat it because I know a lot of people are going to get baited with this. It didn't matter who won the election when it comes to the next 6 to 12 months of the market performance. It doesn't matter. The market has very little to do with the president or what the president does. Now, there may be things that they do that impact the market. I'm not saying it's zero, but it's a very low correlation. The stuff that's happening in the markets has to do with what happened 6, 12 months ago, not what Trump's doing or not doing. So I think in the short term, in the next few months, we're going to have a good bull market because November, December, January, February, March, April are typically the best months of the year. So I do expect we're going to have a good market, at least for the next two until the end of the year. And then we'll have to see how January is. But I expect it'll probably continue. But I also do expect in the midterm that we will see some volatility, whether it's early, mid next year or whether that can be held off. But I do expect there to be some rocky times. So just be aware that that has nothing to do with the president. It has to do with the markets and the economics and inflation, all the other stuff that currently Trump has nothing to do with. Now he could do some things that impact. I'm not saying he won't. I would suggest he probably will do things that will impact the market. But generally speaking, most presidents have close to zero impact on economics. It is Congress. It's your local people. It's industries. It's a whole bunch of stuff. So keep close watch because I do think international trade will be impacted, but I also think people will freak out more about it than is actually realistic. I don't know if anyone noticed, but we didn't build a wall when Trump was in. So there's always a lot of hyperbole that happens in politics, and you have to take that with a grain of sand. But as long as the economy's sound, it'll keep plugging. And let's hope the signs that we're seeing of a recession are light and passing. But we are seeing some indication that things are getting a little weird. It's not a strong indication yet, but there's definitely some. So we'll keep you in the loop. So Doug, what are your thoughts here as we kind of wrap it up and with the market?
Well, based on the amount of time left, there's one thing that I did want to make a note of that I think is important to consider with what happened in the markets the last couple of days since the election. There's a gentleman talked about how we now at least the last time, this was right after the election, the S&P 500 at a 3.5% move, while at all-time highs with what they call triple gaps, was ironically March of 2000. So, obviously there's not the same conditions, that we had back then. We do have some things out there that are certainly continue to be, risks. This, what happened in the markets was not good for bonds. And of course, the Fed has come out, by the way, and announced that they're going to keep with a 25% rate cut, which will help, which will temper some of the issues with long-term bonds to a degree, as long as there's buyers out there that feel confidence in them. And that's been the big problem with the bond market is that the bond sales are just terrible. Nobody really wants to buy those U.S. Treasuries right now. So the banks are still sitting at risk, a significant risk of the unrealized losses that they are currently sitting on, and that's only going to potentially get exacerbated by the effect that we have, bonds are continuing to get beat up, which means that they are, should there be any significant demand for liquidity, which can happen when people get euphoric about the stock market, that can begin to be a catalyst to have people want to get their money out and move that money out of cash more and more. That's still a risk for the banks. And again, sometimes with some of these markets and where we're at, all it takes is something like a black swan event, such as, what could, go on with, bank solvency, that could lead to a lot of, potential challenges there. Now, again, we've been saying these risks are there and they've been going on for a long time. It's just things to think about. Another thing, it was posted by Lance Roberts, which is a follower of yours, Kirk, on social media. So someone that respects what you talk about to a degree. But, there was a quote that the macroeconomic data has literally exploded stronger. Yes, it has. However, a lot of the issue is that things were getting pretty pessimistic from economists leading up to the election. Now that this election has obviously turned out a very positive outlook to the markets and certain industries, driving this significant upticks, over the last couple of days. It just also means that now if people are pessimistic and the markets are pessimistic and the views are pessimistic and you exceed those expectations, then the markets bounce. If those expectations are now extremely optimistic on growth, if there's anything, remember, we've talked about this with the markets. If things come in as expected, okay. If they come in better than expected, markets go flying, people get happy. But if they start coming in under what's expected, that's when pessimism in the stocks starts setting back in. So keep in mind, the further that this market blows up in optimism, the greater it's like setting the bar higher and higher, the greater that we have to continue to hurdle those to meet those same expectations, which means we are continuing to get a thinner and thinner air under that market. However, is it thinner air, or are we just pumping more into air into the atmosphere? That's the thing that, time will tell. So.
Well, great. Well, Doug, I know we're kind of wrap it up here. Final thoughts from you here as we wrap it up for this this presidential wrap up episode.
Absolutely. So, here's what's going to happen. Get up today, just like you did on Wednesday and Thursday, and go face the world. You're gonna still got to go to work. You still got to raise your kids. You still got to take care of your loved ones. And obviously, life goes on. And one of those things that goes on is going back to the kids. It's expensive to raise kids, and one of the things that makes that expensive is going to be college. And a lot of people that are listening here probably look at it as I've got high income, but I don't need to do any planning because what can I do? It's not just for middle income earners. Higher your income, the more important effective college planning may be, since college is often paid for with after-tax dollars. And a lot of financial advisors just kind of look at it as a savings issue. But the reality is there is a lot of different ways to save on how you pay for college beyond savings. Identifying strategies that leverage your unique situation to help you save on it, taking into consideration specialized college planning for business owners, planning for financial aid, school-specific scholarships, coordinating financial planning with grandparents, cash flow strategies, options for covering shortfalls. The issue is that it's more than just a simplistic approach, one size fits all. It's critical that you have something that's going to be tailored to your unique situation, that, again, gifting strategies, tax strategies. These are things that can ultimately save tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in wealth over your lifetime. If you don't know all the ways that you could not only be getting the cost down, but also the ways that you could save by how you pay, then you need to start looking today. And you can get an opportunity to learn a little bit more through our Easy College Planning Report. If you want to find out more about that, my website is mergentcollegeadvisors.com. That's MERGENT, mergentcollegeadvisors.com. Go check it out, because again, you probably are losing money unknowingly and unnecessarily, and you don't have to when it comes to paying for college.
Well, thanks, Doug. Always appreciate your points of view, and certainly helping people save for college with things are getting more expensive. It's one of the reasons why Trump won, is people are struggling, and there's college is one of the biggest expenses you can have. So kudos to you for helping people save on college. I know I'm dreading in 2 years when my kids, when my oldest is old enough to start going through that process. So appreciate your opinion here. So that's the show for this week. Thank you again for joining us on Money Tree Investing Podcast. My name's Kirk Chisholm, wealth manager of Innovative Advisor Group. We don't just manage your wealth, we make your life better. You can find more about me at innovativewealth.com. And of course, you can find me every week here on this show. You can also check out our show at Money Tree Investing Podcast. On our website, you'll have access to the show notes, resources, and the archive shows. Please remember to subscribe on our YouTube channel for immediate access to the new shows when they're released. When you subscribe to the show, it allows us to get access to some of the top minds of investing in personal finance. While you're here, please leave a comment and question if you want us to address it on the show. Have a great week ahead, and remember, no one will care about your money like you do, so invest in your life.